What's up guys, C2113 here, and today I'm bringing you my full review of the Lifeproof Aquaphonics AQ11 waterproof speaker. So I've had this speaker and used it as a daily driver for about a week now, and honestly, for most speakers, I would probably give it a little bit longer to do a full review. But at this point, I think I can give you my review because I can't deal with this thing anymore as an everyday driver. So let's get into it. And again, if you see me looking over to my left, it's because I've got a list of the things I want to make sure I don't forget to mention. So, I apologize for that ahead of time. So let's talk about the good, okay, first. One of the things that's great, obviously, with the speaker is its water resistance. I mean, this thing is amazing. Now, again, it's the middle of the winter. I haven't gone on any trips. I'm not going swimming. So, unfortunately, it's not the best time to test this sort of thing. But I did do a lot of tests, like I washed the speaker. I did multiple bathtub tests where I would fill the tub with water and I would get this thing playing in there and just sitting floating around. And again, it's excellent for that. Something that I do with my JBL Extreme all the time is wash it off, because I'll often be listening to music while I'm cooking or preparing food, and it'll get stuff on there, grease or bits of stuff, and it'll get dried on there, and you really can't just wipe that off. It has to be washed off. And the great thing about the JBL Extreme is you can wash it. So that's something that I would always do. Something that's really nice about this speaker is because it doesn't have the same sort of nylon mesh on there. It's got a straight, hard plastic surface on there. Is number one, you can just wipe it off if you don't want to wash the speaker, but also the speaker is even more insulated from water than the JBL Extreme. It is almost fully waterproof. So as a result, washing this thing was a dream. It was easy, and because every surface is smooth, there was no, it's very easy to dry off. With the JBL Extreme, after you wash this thing for a good hour until the mesh dries out, the sound sounds way different and a lot more muffled because all of this mesh is saturated with water and it's sort of insulating the speaker from actually getting that sound out. So that's the number one thing. Great water resistance. Number two is obviously the floating feature. This goes, again, hand in hand with the water resistance. A speaker that's meant for this much water immersion, it's great to have it have a floating feature so that if you actually do put this to the test and throw it in the water, it's not gonna sink, number one, past its rated depth, and number two, it's not gonna sink to where you can't get it. You know what I mean? So this is a very nice feature. It means that if you're in the pool, I wouldn't try this in the ocean because it's probably still gonna float away. I'd tie something to it, you know what I mean? But if you're in a pool, for sure, you can just put this speaker in the pool and have music blasting, and you don't even need to worry about, we're gonna be further away from the speaker and the speaker's on the side of the pool. It doesn't matter because you can just take it with you in the pool with you. Another thing, it has great Bluetooth connectivity. This thing has far better range than even my JBL Extreme. I find that my JBL Extreme, if I go, in my house where there's a ton of walls, if I go maybe 2-3 rooms over, it's already starting to trip up. If I go downstairs and walk more than like maybe 3 or 4 yards away from the equivalent position on the floor that the speaker's on, basically, so the speaker's here, and I walk on the bottom floor, I walk over here, it's gonna disconnect. So again, this is far better because I was able to walk anywhere in my house and be connected to this speaker. So Bluetooth connectivity, big plus on that. Another thing I love about this, especially given that it has such nice, big, easy to press buttons, is the lockout feature. Now, in unboxing, I didn't make it clear, but the switch doesn't just lock out the power button, it locks out all the buttons. So once you enable that lockout, none of the buttons can be automatically pressed. And I think that's great because, especially when I'm carrying the JBL Extreme here and I got it on my back, oftentimes my back will end up pressing the power button or one of these volume buttons or even the connect button, and it just messes things up. I love that on a speaker like this, that's gonna be roughed around and thrown around and exposed to water and that sort of thing, that these buttons can be turned off so you can't accidentally press anything. It's a small feature, but it's a huge bonus, especially if you're going to be using it in areas that you're likely to accidentally press buttons. Like, for example, if I'm working on my car and I'm underneath the car and I want to change the song, let's say I got Pandora or something on, I want to skip to the next song. If I'm reaching over, I can press these big buttons. But at the same time, let's say I have my playlist set and I don't want to have anything get messed up. But let's say I'm far away and I want to pull the speaker close to me. but I know that I can't, because of the position I'm in, I can't actually look at the buttons, and I can just feel, I would only be able to feel them. I don't want to accidentally press one of those buttons and then not know how to get back to the song it was before. If I have a playlist set, I just want to set it and forget it, you know what I mean? So that's what that's great for as well. All right, let's get into the bad. And I think this is, for me, a couple of these are deal breakers for sure. One of them is a big one. So first I'll say the button response for pressing the on speaker buttons is extremely slow. So if I press the volume up button on here, it will take forever for my phone to get that signal. So basically, if I push the volume up button 3 times, it will take my phone almost 3 seconds to receive that signal. And then once it sort of comes back, you know, for a few seconds while I'm pressing the button, the response will be much better. But this is true of almost every button. The skip button, you know, the play, pause, all of that stuff. And while I do know that there's also like a delay on the JBL Extreme, it's very predictable. With the JBL Extreme, every single time there's a delay, when you press the play, pause button, it takes about a second. All right, and every time it's the same second. So when you first get used to the speaker, you'll play, pause, and you won't get the song to stop or start, because every time you'll think it didn't work and you press it again. But after you get used to the speaker, you know to expect that delay and you just work around it. With this thing, it's extremely irregular in its performance in terms of the delay. Sometimes you'll press the volume button, you'll get not even a second delay. Other times you'll try to increase the volume, and you'll get a 3 to 4 second delay, and then suddenly you'll just shoot up. So again, this is really problematic for me, because if you're trying to get an exact dialed in volume, I mean, it's very difficult to do that. And certainly if you're not wanting to go too high, but you just want to increase a little bit, I mean, this will throw you off all over the place. So for me, that's a big downside. Another thing I want to talk about is the ports, okay? The ports on this side, specifically the charging port, the USB port, and the aux in port. These are, as I mentioned in my unboxing video, these are not actually sealed. Like, this seal is not actually a seal, it's just a dust cover. And so the manual says that these are waterproof ports, and I'm sure that probably means they have some sort of conformal coating or something on there to waterproof them. My problem with that is that no coating is going to do as well as no water exposure whatsoever. And while this might be okay for fresh, clean water, this starts to be a problem for both chlorine and especially salt water. And I think as a speaker that's advertised as super water friendly, I find it kind of ridiculous that there are ports on here that are not completely sealed off. It wouldn't be very difficult to make this have an O-ring or a gasket around it and just be able to force in there. And again, this is something that I'm sure they did for cost. They said, well, it's cheaper to just, you know, spray some conformal coating on the circuitry and isolate it, and then we can just put a dust cover and call it good. The problem is, again, is it's going to be a problem if they get warranty claims or if they get dissatisfied customers. And more importantly, at the end of the day, for the consumers, I just think it is a huge downside. Now, I didn't run into problems because, again, every test that I did was basically with tap water. So, you know, very little, if any, chlorine, and you know, no salt or anything like that. So nothing really corrosive. But again, they talk about using this in salt water. I wouldn't want to bring this in salt water, not with exposed ports like that. So honestly, that's a big downside for me, and something that would make me really nervous to use this, let's say, on the beach or somewhere that there's going to be salt water. Because again, I wouldn't want salt water to touch those ports because I know they're not actually sealed off. So that's a downside. The sound quality. Now, I know that when I was doing my initial unboxing, I said it was okay, but it had very little bass. I mean, that was an understatement, because again, I've gotten to use the speaker for a week as my daily driver, and then you know when you start using something, you really notice the difference. I would every now and then do a comparison with a JBL Extreme, and every time it got more night and day. Something that I've noticed is that the sound is not only very muffled sounding, it's also obviously lacking in the bass, and it even just lacks the same amount of power. So I find that the volume doesn't even get as loud as the JBL Extreme. And for a speaker that's almost larger in footprint than the JBL Extreme, that's very disappointing. And part of that reason for that is that there's so much space taken up by all this protection and specifically this huge compartment on the bottom, which I think is a great feature, but in the end, if it's going to be a huge sacrifice for sound quality, I'm not sure that that's a worthy compromise. And I'm sure they could have implemented this better. But basically, it's a very large frame, but a much smaller actual internal speaker setup. And I think that is ultimately the biggest disappointment, is that the sound quality just isn't there. And for a speaker this size, you would expect it to get much louder, to have much more bass, and have much better instrument separation and sound reproduction. And I think that's where it's lacking the most. And oh yeah, not to mention, this speaker is $300. For $300, you can get a way better speaker. And again, I understand that this has lots of different features in terms of waterproofing and that sort of thing, but there are other speakers that are at the very minimum water resistant that are going to give you much better sound. Now, I said this in the beginning, even in my unboxing, if you need water resistance and water protection and utility and strength over everything else, I think that maybe this is a good option if you can get it for less than its standard price. But even then, because of the issue with the charging ports being exposed and not actually sealed off, I'm not sure I can recommend this as a great option, because again, that definitely defeats, in my mind, a big part of what I would consider great water protection. Because great water protection to me means fully sealed off. But that's not fully sealed off, not in the slightest. So I personally would feel uncomfortable dunking this in water, in salt water especially. So at that point, I think that is a huge flaw. I think if this was actually a sealed port, honestly, I could recommend it as long as it was at a reduced price. I could recommend it for those who are hardcore looking for a waterproof speaker. But at its current price range of price of $300, and with its current dismal sound reproduction and overall performance to size ratio, I can't really recommend this speaker. But I hope this has been helpful. I hope this has been informative. And if you like this video, give me a like. If you have any questions about it, comments, etc., you know what to do. Leave them below. I'll be happy to answer them. And if you want to see more, please subscribe. I'd really appreciate it.